Welcome to your cozy corner of calm. Here, you'll find gentle stories and the soothing sound of rain, created to help you unwind, ease your thoughts, and drift peacefully into sleep. If this space brings you comfort, consider subscribing so you'll always have a quiet place to return to. Now, make yourself comfortable, close your eyes, and let tonight's story carry you gently into rest. This story, my hand to God, it's true, and it started on June 8, 1974. I'm typing now, fast as I can, trying to get it down before it ends. I'm starting typing this out at 1 p.m., Thursday, May 18, 2023, and I've got somewhere I've got to be at 5 p.m. I'm going to be there. On June 8, 1974, I was traveling with my boss, a member of the U.S. House of Representatives, visiting his West Coast district. We'd been doing meet and greets and photo ops, shaking hands with local and state officials, doing press briefings and holding fundraisers, working one-on-ones, meetings with big dollar donors. One been in district for 3 days. Everything was completely normal until day 3. Some guy walks into a photo op and whispers into the congressman's ear. The boss frowns, turns, and looks at us, his staff, and the photo op ends. At this point, none of us know what's going on. We're shuffled around for a few hours. The congressman and his chief of staff huddle, drift apart, huddle, and drift apart. And finally, stuffed into 2 automobiles, we hit the road. Destination unclear. We stopped occasionally and the congressman would make or receive calls. First at a state patrol substation. Second, a truck stop. Third, an administrative building in some podunk town. Every stop, the congressman was out of the car, into a building, and back in about 5 minutes. The oldest member of our team, Ray Herman, is a DC lifer, lanky and soft-spoken. He's worked the Beltway for decades. At the photo op, he sees the guy whisper in the congressman's ear, turns to us and says, "Shit's hit the fan." What Ray Herman doesn't know, what none of us know, is he has less than 24 hours left to live. We get to a small airport and there, waiting for us, is a military aircraft. I wonder, why a military aircraft? We board and were given a spiel by the same guy who whispered in the congressman's ear. We assume he's FBI or CIA, and we start referring to him as Mr. Personality. Here's what he tells us. 1. You're not going where you're going, and upon leaving, you won't have been there. We'll inform you later where you were and what you were doing. 2. Follow all commands. Eyes forward means eyes forward. Eyes down means eyes down means eyes down. Stop means stop, and go means go. 3. If you're asked a question, the answer is either yes or no. Do not hesitate to answer. Do not answer a question with a question. 4. Do not talk amongst yourselves until hearing talk amongst yourselves. I look around and see the lone female on our staff, Brenda Turner, scribbling in a notebook. We all know the congressman and Brenda have been spending time together. They're having a thing. It is not to be mentioned, and isn't. Brenda is smart, talented, and capable, knows her way around D.C., and is phenomenal at her job. She's a brunette, 5'9" or thereabouts, and a dish. She's scribbling away, and Mr. Personality clears his throat. Intentionally. We all look up. He looks at her and shakes his head. She's back to scribbling. Again, he clears his throat. She doesn't look up. The throat is cleared once more before Mr. Personality stands up, crosses to her, and grabs her notebook. She's up, glaring, about to speak when the congressman enters the aircraft. She looks at him. He looks at Mr. Personality, looks at her, and shakes his head. Mr. Personality opens her notebook, looks at her scribbling, rips pages out, and hands the notebook back to him. She's about to speak when the congressman steps toward her, holds a finger up to his lips, and shakes his head. He puts a hand on her shoulder. gives her a slight nod, meaning, sit down, I'll explain later. And she does. He goes further back into the aircraft, and the plane takes off. It's a short flight, and we stumble off the plane to a blast of heat and piercing sunshine. Mr. Personality says, eyes down, and I gotta say, it worked. We're all eyes down, immediately. Everybody is shuffling their feet, stretching, and a Jeep pulls up. Sounded like a Jeep. And the congressman climbs in and the Jeep pulls off. We're still eyes down, shuffling our feet. And a bus pulls up, military brown, and we get on board. The bus pulls out, with Mr. Personality standing in front, next to the driver, looking through the windshield. That's when we get a good first look at where we are. It's the desert. Washed out yellows and browns, washed out blue sky. We're heading toward 2 aircraft hangars, and the door to one is open, and I swear it's true. When we pass that hangar, everyone gasps. We see what's just inside, and it looks like it's straight out of the movies. Silver, shiny, a bubble on top, standing on 3 legs. A flying saucer. The bus drops us at some barracks. There are 2, where Mr. Personality says, disembark. He gets off first. We file off. And he's about to speak when Brenda steps forward and says, what's going on? Superboy? He looks at her, nonplussed. Mr. Personality stepped back onto the bus. The bus pulled off, and a kid in fatigue steps out of building number 2. He's nervous, it's apparent, and holds the door and asks if we'd care to inspect our rooms. We do. They're Spartan, but who are we to argue? The kid disappears and we stand in the hallway, wondering if we're allowed to talk. There are 4 of us are. Me, Donald Anderson. As I write this, I'm 71 years old. I've already mentioned Brenda and Ray, both highly qualified. Both very, very smart. Our 4th, the Congressman's Chief of Staff, Oscar Nash, an Ivy League grad. Tall, brown hair, brown eyes, manicured, clothes pressed and shoes shined, from a family of DC mainstays. Ray, a bit tense, says, think we're getting out of here? Not likely. Things disappear here? Oscar pipes up. Shut up, he says. He's looking at Ray, but he's saying it to everyone. He starts spouting party line on national security, motherhood, and apple pie, and on, while we exchange glances. His oratory is about to go up another notch when the congressman walks in, wearing his God Bless America look, and says, okay, here's the thing. We're not here, and when we leave, we rent here. At this point, nobody knows how long we're going to not be here, so stay calm. Get some rest. He made eye contact with each of us. Off the record, he says, weird shit has happened, or is happening. We're not sure it's over, and we're going to not be here until what is not happening quits happening. It's a deer in the headlights moment. He sees that and makes his point again. Remember, we're not here, and you never heard me say that. He turns, looks at Brenda, and she walks over to him. They start whispering, and he nods a couple times, and she nods a couple times before he steps off and is gone. 5 minutes later, I'm lying on a half-worn-out bed in my woefully substandard room, and there's a knock at the door. It's Ray. He steps in, leans toward me and says, you see what I saw? I answer in the affirmative. Crazy shit happens here, he says, and shrugs. He left without another word, and that would be the last time I saw him alive. Did I say they took our watches? They did. Wallets, too. A military guy took them after the congressman left. That upped the tension a notch. In the middle of the night, I wake up to noise in the hall. I get up, open the door, and see the congressman and Brenda talking to a man dressed in fatigues. Oscar's door opens. He steps out, so I do the same. He has a few words with the congressman, walks over to me and asks, have you talked with Ray since we bunked in here? I answer in my best interests. Nope. Brenda is looking at Oscar. Oscar is looking at me. The soldier and the congressman leave. We go back into our rooms. I can't get back to sleep, so I wait a while, then decide to take what I hope will be a discreet look around. I slip on slacks and shoes and tiptoe outdoors. I'm getting the night air. That's my story if I get stopped. In front of our barracks, I see the runway and 2 hangars. I slip behind our building, walk its entire length, walk the length of the next one, and stop when I see there's another building there. It's the first time I've seen it. It's smaller and set back. Before I can take another step, I hear a Jeep, so I crouch down and watch the Jeep pull up at that building. The driver jumps out. A passenger jumps out. They root around in the back of the Jeep and drag out a body. That's what it looks like to me. I think that immediately. It's a body. Stars are out. Moon's up. It's a bright night. But the 2 guys, the body, the Jeep, they're silhouettes. Right away I'm thinking it's a body. And what's worse, I'm thinking it's Ray. Instantly, that's what I'm thinking. They haul their cargo into the building. And in a minute or 2 and they come back out. Fire up the Jeep and take off. Something flies out of the Jeep as it's racing off. White, shining in the moonlight, floats up like a feather before fluttering to the ground. I scurry over and pick it up. Scurry back to the corner of the building. Eyeball the thing and break out in sweat. It's Ray's official ID. I run back to where I picked it up, drop it, and skulk all the way back to my room, hoping nobody's seen me. A couple hours later, there's knocking up and down the hall. We get up. It's just me and Oscar. Get herded down to the other barracks where there's a mess hall. Mr. Personality comes in and provides crucial direction. Eyes down, he says. Brenda shows up next. Nobody says a word. Big plates are dropped in front of us. Eggs, bacon, toast, followed by black coffee. And Mr. Personality gives us the okay, and we're whispering between ourselves, and pretty quick, another soldier comes in and whispers in Mr. Personality's ear, "Please." And Mr. Personality looks to me and says, "The congressman would like a word with you." I follow Mr. Personality out the door, and we go over to the building I saw last night. And walking in, I figure it's an admin building of sorts. The congressman is in a conference room. Flag on the wall, maps, 2 long tables, photos and plaques. The congressman nods, waves me in, and I sit. "You sleep okay?" he asks, and I tell my second line. "Yes, sir." "Good," he says. "First, let me thank you for your commitment. It's appreciated." He's smiling. I'm smiling, so why am I apprehensive? Here's why. He reaches into his shirt pocket and pulls something out and pushes it across the table toward me. It's Razy. "They tell me," he said, and he looked toward the door, then back to me. "We were alone. Your fingerprints are on this." "You have my fingerprints. You were fingerprinted a couple years ago," he said. "Your job? It's required." I froze up. "How?" he asked. "Would your prints get on Ray Herman's ID?" Do I tell him what I saw or play dumb? Didn't have to. Ray's body was discovered this morning, he says. In this building, just inside the south door. They're saying he had a heart attack. He made a face like he's not buying it. You think he left his room and broke into this building, looking for a safe place to have a heart attack? The congressman is up for election in 18 months. He needs this like he needs a poke in the eye. For a politician, the number 1 thing is getting elected. Number 2 is getting elected again. And number 3 is keeping party bosses happy. Number 4 is raising money to get elected. He's good at those things. He leaned across the table at me, glanced at the closed door, inched just a bit closer to me, and starts chewing on his lower lip. When he talks, it's a whisper. There's weird shit going on. He's nervous. I've seen the congressman happy, sad, concerned, bored, irritated, angry, disappointed, interested, and indifferent. I've never seen him nervous. "We gotta get the hell out of here," he says. Back at the mess, Oscar and Brenda are speculating, and the word alien is tossed around. While they're talking, in comes a soldier and tells us our departure is in an hour. We're to go to our rooms, grab our stuff, and meet back in the mess. Back in my room, I grab my stuff, stuff it into my suitcase, then hurriedly write notes to myself about what I think's been going on. I write descriptions of Mr. Personality, military guys, the runway, the hangars, the buildings and surroundings, and the flying saucer. I make a quick pit stop, pick up the suitcase, open my door, step into the hallway, and turn right. Depart the barracks. The door closes behind me, and immediately I'm standing in the dark. It's pitch black. My hands start shaking, my mouth goes dry, and I had this thought instantly. No matter how brilliant or crazed or duplicitous or scientifically advanced the U.S. military is, they can't turn day into night. My gut tells me the aliens are monkeying with the sun, the moon, and the stars. Sound crazy? It felt crazy, believe me. I try going back in the building, find the door locked, and my gut tells me I'm on my own. It's instinctive. I'm getting an up-close look at the weird shit that Congressman was talking about. I stand there perfectly still, listening, in spooky quiet. There's no way in hell I'm going to say something as stupid as, "Who's there?" or anybody there. And after a while I take a hesitant step and creep along the buildings until I can just barely make out the shape of the admin building. I stop, standing there a moment, and I'm about to head toward that admin building when I hear a screeching coming from one of the hangars. The door opens and 3D shapes come out of the hangar where we'd all seen the flying saucer. Those shapes start coming toward me. They walk to, and then past, the admin building, walk toward me, and I start shaking, nervous as I've ever been. And they walk right up to me. When they get close enough, I'm seeing triplets, 4 feet tall, maybe 4.5. Perfect duplicates of each other. Aliens. There's a movie, Village of the Damned, dated 1960, based on a book called The Midwich Cuckoos, published in 1957. The triplets who walked up to me look pretty much like the children. That's what they're called in the book. The children in the Midwich Cuckoos. The children in Village of the Damned. In the book, in the movie, those children were the offspring of aliens. The aliens stare at me, relax, then all of them ask a question. There's no other way to say it. It's like they were all talking at once, even though I don't think I heard anything audible. "Are you Donald?" they ask. I was in shock, moving toward Unhinged, and I don't remember answering. Then 2 of them stepped back. One stepped forward and says to me, this time it's audible, and his voice sounded exactly like the congressman's. He says to me, "We gotta get the hell out of here." He motions with his head. Then all 3 turn and walk toward the hangar. I followed. Seemed the logical thing to do. At the hangar, the saucer we saw earlier is backed into a corner. They don't even look at it. They have some kind of conversation, and then the one that did the talking. That sounded like the congressman. He steps back toward me. He steps closer, bows. You know, like you see Japanese do. And for some reason I bow to him, and before I straighten up I hear him say, "Be patient." I've had a long time to wonder just what that meant. Have I been patient since that day? Don't know, really. But it's been a very long time. Anyhow, right when he says that, right when he finishes, I straighten up from that bow, and suddenly I'm in broad daylight. I'm on a city street, people around, traffic going by. I start hyperventilating. A man stops and says, "Hey buddy, you okay?" And I can't answer. He's leaning over, inspecting me. Then he's looking around like wishing he was somewhere else. I suck it up, convince the guy I'm okay, and I huff a couple times, rub my face, and look around, and a car pulls up the curb. The driver's window goes down. There's a woman inside, and she hollers, "What the hell?" She gets out, leaves the car running, and when I get a good look at her, my legs buckle. It's Brenda Turner. She leaned in real close and hissed, "Get in the car." "Now!" She's nervous, puts a hand on my arm, guides me into the passenger seat, goes around and gets into the driver's seat, and we're rolling in seconds. She drives into a park by some river. Parks. Tells me to get out. I do. We start walking. I'm dizzy. My breathing is off. We get some distance from the car. She keeps looking around like she's afraid we're being followed. And and says, "Okay, Donald, I don't know why you're here, but you gotta get out of Omaha." That's how I discovered I was in Omaha, Nebraska. Sounds like B-movie nonsense, right? Sounds like something from a cheap, poorly plotted sci-fi movie from 1952. But it's the truth. I'm in Omaha, sweating through my clothes, sweating so much my hair is wet. I don't respond, and she's staring into my eyes, waiting for an answer. "I don't know where you're coming from," she says, "and I don't know why you're here." She's angry and obviously frightened, but I've been here for 10 years now, alone, and never expected to see you again. If I'm not in shock, I go into shock right then. That's got to be it, right? Shock. I'm cold, trembling, goosebumps, bending over like I'm going to heave. 10 years? I'm thinking 10 years from when? Didn't I just bow to some alien? Minutes ago? I ache all over? She's rubbing her hands together, trying to compose herself. And finally she says, "It's June 1984. You're in Omaha, Nebraska. Where you been for the last 10 years? We get back to her car. Brenda leans back, takes a couple deep breaths, then off we go. "I'll get you cleaned up and we'll talk," she says. "Then you're out of here." We get to her bungalow, get inside. She plops me into a chair and says, "Spill it." So I tell her the story I'm writing here. I step out of the room where I never was, tiptoe past the barracks, spot the admin building, see 3 figures walking toward me. I'm glued to the ground. They're aliens, one bows. I bow, and when I straighten up, I'm in Omaha. That's so hard to believe. We're at her kitchen table. She stands, walks into her living room, goes down a hallway, comes back and drops an accordion folder on the table, opens it, pulls out a newspaper, drops it in front of me and says, "Read the headline." It's the New York Times. There's a banner headline across the top. It reads, "Congressional staff lost in airplane crash." The date on the paper, June 11th, 1974. In short, me, Congressman Oscar, Brenda, and Ray were killed in a plane crash on June 11, 1974. "Here's my story," Brenda says, and off she goes, and her story is like mine. In 1974, she has breakfast. Hears we're departing. Packs her stuff. Steps out of whatever building she's been in. Tiptoes in the dark. Bumps into 3 aliens. Hears pretty much what I heard. Bows and wakes up in Arlington Heights, Illinois. She's wobbling down the street when a car pulls up. Rolls down the window. And presto chango. It's Oscar. He takes her to his place. Sound familiar? In Arlington Heights, gives her hell for showing up in his town. Gives her a suitcase full of money. 1s, 5s, 10s, and 20s. And tells her she's got to get out of town. She points at the suitcase, asks, "Where'd you get that?" Oscar tells her she had it with her when he found her. And she says, "Bullshit." And he says, "Okay, don't believe me. Suit yourself. But it was standing beside you when I found you. I grabbed it, threw it in the back seat, got you in the car. You're welcome, by the way. And here you are. The suitcase, the one with the money, it's her suitcase, the one she had in Nevada." My response to her story? "Where's my suitcase?" She stands, motions for me to follow, and we go outside to her car. She pops the trunk, and sure enough, there's my suitcase, the one I had in Nevada. I could use a change of clothes, I say. I gotta stake plenty money in there to buy clothes, she says. "You haven't looked?" She shakes her head. "Can I? It's your suitcase." I look. She's right. There's plenty money in there. "So here's how it goes," she says. She looks around the neighborhood like she's scoping the place out. "Oscar told me this and I thought it was selfish, but it's for the best." She paused then. "Don't make a lot of friends. You won't need money. Ever. I'm sure of that. But live a quiet life. Suck it up. Okay? It is what it is. My advice? Live quietly. Make acquaintances, not friends." She paused, swallowed. looked a bit forlorn. "I don't have friends," she said. Yet another pause, and she shrugged, grimaced, and shrugged some more. "I'll get you to the train station tomorrow morning. Get yourself a ticket that goes a long way. Go about 3/4 of the way." That's what I did. Then get off somewhere. And she puffed, lowered her gaze, and shook her head. "For I have a life. At this point, I've only been gone from where I never was a couple hours." 10 years went by? "Okay," I say. "I hear what you're saying. Quiet life. No friends. Go far. Start over. But when I need a job, the suitcase," she said. "You need money. Go into the suitcase. Before you ask, I worried for years about my suitcase. Would someone steal it? Would I lose it? Would it run out of money? But I still have it. I have quit wondering how it works." The next morning, she took me to the train station, and I took a train heading east. The suitcase has been churning out my allowance since. I last saw Brenda in 1984, 39 years ago. I've lived all over the USA, moving every couple years. The suitcase provides financial independence, so relocating isn't difficult. My first stop was in the South, and it was there that I developed the rules I've been living by. Don't throw money around. Walk slow and talk low. Be cordial, polite, and stand a fish. It's worked. The well-appointed mobile home community has worked for me. They're filled with polite and cordial people. I've traveled regularly, working as a consultant. And if questions continue after someone asks, "What do you do for a living?" I grimace and say, "I help clients stay out of trouble with Uncle Sam." That works great. Add "trouble" and Uncle Sam to any sentence and you'll see eyes roll and chins start nodding. Why the traveling? First off, the looking over my shoulder is less demanding when I'm on the road. Second, I'm always looking for a new place to call home, just in case I need to move. It hasn't been an easy life. I get lonesome. I have trust issues. I have this secret, and you might ask, why have I kept this all secret? I don't know. The plane crash, maybe? Isn't that one way of telling me to keep my mouth shut? The suitcase that provides financial independence? What can I say? It sounds like crappy science fiction, I know. But I swear I'm not making it up. And the suitcase also provides a driver's license, a passport too. And whenever I changed addresses, I got a new driver's license and passport. 10 years after Omaha, I'm living in the upper Midwest, in a nice mobile home community. Walking out of a grocery store one day, I see a car circling the lot, going fast, then slow. The car makes 2 lefts, is heading down my row. I'm putting groceries in my car when that car pulls up behind mine. Stops. I turn around and my heart sinks. It's Oscar Nash. "Oh my God," he says. "Dawn, I can't believe it's you. Get in the car." I go over, lean down and get a good look at him. He's sweating bullets, breathing heavy, licking his lips, and he smells like a distillery. Thinking fast, I say, "Stay here." He's shaking his head. So I say, "Pull into that space right there." So I say, "Pull into that space right there." I point at it. He pulls in. I say, "Shut off the ignition." He does. "Stay here," I say. "I'm getting my groceries home. I'll be back. Give me 20 minutes. Can you do that?" He's mumbling a bit. I reach in, tap his shoulder and ask, "Are you okay?" He looks up at me and says, "I'm being followed." Just what I needed to hear. He's all panicked, shaking and mumbling, so I ask him, "What did I say?" And he blurts out, "Stay." And I say, "Good." I reach in, pull the key out of the ignition, hold it up for him to see and say, "I'll be right back." "Do not go anywhere." I hand him the key and say, "Put that in your pocket." And I take off. Takes me 20 minutes. When I get back, he's asleep. I tap on the roof until he wakes up, and when he does, he rolls his screwy eyes and asks, "Want to hear my story?" And I say, "Not interested. And you gotta get out of here. Now." Today, little good that did. He spent the next 12 hours talking, me listening, He's a basket case, certain he's being followed. He starts with that suitcase. They have to know where I am, right? Wouldn't that make sense? Frankly, it does. I've thought that myself. Then he drops this bomb. Dawn, I'm married. We're at a small park. He's pacing, rubbing his eyes and his mouth, licking his lips. 3 times. I'm married 3 times. Once in Illinois, once in Wyoming, and once in Georgia. Lord, help me. I immediately think the worst. Christ, Oscar, I say, you haven't done something. And he knows where I'm going and starts shaking his head. No, I didn't hurt them. No, I didn't hurt them. No, they're all alive. Okay, I say, no biggie. So, you're divorced twice. No, he says. He starts the pacing again. I'm still married, he said. To all 3? I just pick up and go when things get a little dicey. Suddenly, he's sheepish. How did you find me? I ask him. He sits down. Luck, he said. I left Georgia a week ago. I've been driving with no destination. He looked like he was going to cry. Is it luck I found you? Coincidence? Or someone's plan? An alien's plan? He starts the pacing again, stops, sits, and goes all serious. It's gotta be their plan, he says. I get the feeling that he wants to hang on to me for dear life. And life is dear, I've learned that much. If Oscar is being followed, where's that put me? Stay here, I say to him again. I want to show you something. He's pale. I wonder how long it's been since he's had a real night's sleep. You trust me? I ask him, and he's about to swallow his tongue, telling me he does. I say it again. Stay here. Give me an hour. I'll be right back. I need to show you something. Promise me you'll stay here. He looks at me like I'm his parish priest. I promise, he says. I get back to my trailer, and in 45 minutes, I've got everything I need. 13 hours later, I'm 3 states away, sleeping in a rest stop. Couple hours of sleep, more hours on the road, and I'm figuring if he's being followed. I might be being followed, so I'm on high alert. I spend a week at a dumpy old resort. It's not all that busy. Then another couple weeks bouncing around until I'm ensconced in nice mobile home community multiple states away. There's a new driver's license in the suitcase, a new passport, and I start over. I'm in my early 50s, financially secure. I dodged the Oscar bullet. So what would be the sensible thing to do? I ask you, what would an intelligent person do with decent health? Some serious financial security and a quiet, private life. I didn't do it. I went full bore into investigating my situation. It was unwise, I know. My life was stale. I had more time on my hands than was healthy. And it seemed like it was time I should examine my predicament. Sound noble? It wasn't. I went down the rabbit hole, willingly, enthusiastically. I spent years checking out every news story, every rumor, every theory. I visited every site where true believers believed an alien event had occurred. Amherst, Ohio, check. Grand Junction, Colorado, check. Anchorage, Alaska, check. Yukon Territory, Canada, check. Franklin, North Carolina, check. Cape Hatteras, North Carolina, check. Gulf Breeze, Florida, Farmville, New York. Tinley Park, Illinois, San Diego, California, Phoenix, Chicago, check. Check, 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 check. I spent 20 years confabbing with scientists and mathematicians, conspiracy nuts, wackos, flakes, and screwballs. I figured I was one of the latter. I exchanged theories with PhDs, astronomers, physicists, priests, autodidacts of every stripe, self-professed witches and warlocks, don't ask. Pilots, law enforcement personnel, always wanting my name. Journalists, always wanting my name. Farmers, always wanting my name. Farmers, teachers, housewives, and wannabe science fiction writers. I met a guy who had an enormous collection of photographs, all of them notated and filed chronologically. Snapshots of lights in the air and on the ground and configured in crazy shapes. Photos of airships, scorched fields, people standing and pointing up and pointing down, cops in uniformed military, fields of dead cows, sheep and buffalo, photos of abductees, little aliens, big aliens, men, women, and children floating in the air, being hit by lightning, ascending and descending from spaceships. Whenever I asked where he got them, he went mum. Nice guy, actually, and I stayed with him for a couple weeks when I was in my mid-60s. He had rituals for anything and everything. Over time, I realized his obsessive-compulsive disorder was in a class of its own. In the evenings, we watched episodes of The X-Files. He had the complete series on DVD, and he'd recite dialogue along with Mulder and Scully. He'd make highballs and Wade'd smoke a joint. I tell you, things got screwy. I met a defrocked minister who went on at length about how God is only genuinely available to us after death. But prior to death, aliens were available to those attuned to the proper wave shape. Aliens, he contended, were spiritually advanced and here to help us. His beliefs were a mixture of religion, science, mythology, and movies and TV shows about aliens. He went on and on about this never-ending cascade of experiences he'd had or had heard about prior to our inevitable transformation. He told me shortly before we parted company. I figured transformation meant death. Aliens are available to speak with us. They're shy and reluctant to interfere with our life cycle, since theirs is subtly different. But when approached, they'll share some incredibly valuable spiritual information. When I asked him if he'd ever got some valuable spiritual information from aliens, he got a little squirrely. I didn't push. I burned myself out, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. I gave it all up. I met some great people, met some crazies, learned a great deal, but I never was able to find the clinching piece of evidence I needed. What was I looking for? Well, why had my life gone this way? Why did I feel like I was half alive in the world? Or even more interesting, why did I feel like I was fully alive in half a world? I'd actually seen aliens. I had a close encounter. Was I covering up? Why? Covering what? I know how this all sounds. What I've written here, it sounds a bubble off, right? All those years, searching and questioning and investigating. I'm not sure I heard anything as outlandish as what I experienced. And honestly, I didn't believe most of what I heard. A magic suitcase. Come on. If that ain't a bullshit detail to throw into a bullshit story, I don't know what is. But it's true. I have a magic suitcase. It's been supporting me for over 50 years. So here's the deal. Here's what got me to writing this all down. This morning, May 18th, 2023, things changed dramatically. And right after things changed dramatically, I started typing away at what you're reading. To get it all down just in case somebody wants to hear my tale. This morning, May 18th, 2023, I heard a knock on my door, opened it, and Mr. Personality was standing there smiling. "Good to see you, Don," he said. "Glad you're home." He stepped in without being invited. There was a notepad in his hand, and he was paging through it slowly, before stopping and tearing out a page and handing it to me. "It was just a big mix-up," he said, "but it's fixed." He looked at me and smiled again. I'd never seen him smile before. "Pay attention to the instructions on your sheet." He pointed to the paper in my hand. "Under no circumstances are you to share the information with anyone. Please arrive early." My heart rate had picked up on seeing him. My lips were dry, and I felt woozy, and I was trying to imagine just what he had in mind, and I must have looked like that. "Everything's fixed," he said. "Thanks for understanding." He turned to walk off, stopped, turned back and said, "Oh, and bring the suitcase." The paper had my name on it, the nearby location, and the specified time I'm to be there. I stared at that paper for a long time and felt a mixture of fear anxiety, relief, and world-class curiosity. I wasn't terrified. Does that say something positive about me? I closed the door, sat on my couch, and read everything on that paper multiple times. Then I realized this was my chance to reveal to the world that I had a genuine close encounter, maybe my last chance. Before starting this typing, I drove to the location noted on the paper, stopped a couple blocks away and walked the surrounding neighborhoods, checking out the mixture of homes and businesses in the vicinity. At the exact meet spot, I did a 360, saw nothing out of the ordinary, walked down toward the river, saw nothing out of the ordinary, walked back up to my car, drove back to my place, and got busy typing this. There may be some discrepancies and errors in this report, so please understand. I'm short on time. I'm typing as fast as I can because I've only got a couple hours before my attendance is required elsewhere. Here's my thinking. If I'm still officially dead, like in the newspaper story, then this meeting I'm supposed to attend today could be bad news. Why don't I feel that way? I don't know, but I don't. Really. I'm not worried, and the not being worried is really weird, because I've been worried, off and on, for decades now. But Mr. Personality used the words, mix-up, and it's been fixed at my door. Keeping those words in mind, and knowing he asked that I bring the suitcase, I'm factoring in these things in my decision to show up when and where he wants me to. 1. Area 51. Been there, done that. It has a reputation, right? 2. Aliens and a flying saucer. Seen 'em. Believe in 'em. 3. An unsolved, questionable homicide. Is Ray still alive? I hope so. 4. Day turning into night. Quite a feat. And no, that's not in our military's capability. 5. 10 missing years. I'd like that explained, to be honest. 6. A newspaper publishing a plane crash that maybe didn't happen. Okay, so newspapers make mistakes. We all know that. How do you fix that? 7. Brenda in Omaha. Oscar, wherever he is today. Are they alive? I hope so. 8. A missing, dead congressman. I wonder if he got a suitcase. 9. A magic suitcase. Can I keep it? Haven't I earned it? Haven't I earned it? So, I'm going to that meeting because I am really, really curious as to what has been fixed, who fixed it, and what the fix looks like. Have I mentioned I worked for the U.S. House of Representatives? I know I have. I'm being dramatic. As a former government employee, I assure you there are errors of monumental proportions made regularly within the U.S. government. I suspect that would be true of governments all around the world. Are these errors ever announced publicly? I ask that question because I know the answer. It's no. Were we, myself, Oscar, Brenda, the congressman, Ray, were we unwitting participants in one of those colossal screw-ups? Or maybe, I say maybe, it was a gargantuan screw-up made not by our government, but by aliens working with, or without, or against, or in spite of our government. Who's to say just because aliens can build and operate flying saucers, they're not capable of screwing up? I mean, did their first attempt at a flying saucer actually work? What am I trying to say? Well, I'm guessing the aliens were real. That's not a guess. They were in Area 51 for some reason. Will we ever know the reason? Probably not. Ray did something stupid, I guess. Or maybe he did have a heart attack, another guess. The aliens did what they did to buy time to fix whatever happened. I know. It's a flimsy stab at a bad guess, but I say aliens are just as capable of screwing up as non-aliens are. Were all of us scattered around to buy time to fix it all? Is an hour to an alien the same as an hour to an Earthling? Maybe the aliens were irresponsible or criminals. Maybe they'd hot-wired a saucer or something and done some damage here on planet Earth, which is not cool for aliens to do. And so the responsible aliens eventually came to fix their mess, and it took some serious alien time to do it because, hell, I don't know. I'm getting way out there, I know. I've always enjoyed a good B-movie, but I got nothing else, except 50 plus years of wandering around, wondering should I hide and why, should I go public and why am I afraid and what am I afraid of? Let me stress, I'm not saying that what I'm writing down is completely accurate, but my theory that something screwy happened in Area 51. You haven't heard that before? Am I the only one? Think about that for a minute. Or take as much time as you need. Sorry, but there's no grand finale. I cannot deliver a complex yet perfectly clear explanation for any of it. But let me swear, one more time, everything I've written here has actually happened. Except for my irresponsible criminal alien theory. That's a little shaky. Before I go, let me reveal where I've been living for the last couple years, as well as the time and location of the meat Mr. Personality delivered to me. I've been in Henderson, Kentucky. Nice city, wonderful people, very affordable, nice amenities. You should visit sometime. The location of my meet, the corner of Powell Street and South Water Street, up from the Ohio River. I'm to be there at 5 p.m. today. Last thoughts? There's a bunch of them. But the main one is, I don't know why I think this. I'm expecting to hook up again with Oscar, the congressman, Brenda, Ray, too. I know it's a little late in this tale to bring up time travel, like you needed one more reason to call bullshit on all this. But maybe it's not time travel. Like I said, an hour to an alien verse, an hour to citizen of planet Earth. And, as I finish, one more thing. I've set up contact info, an email address, in case you want to contact me. In case you can contact me. I did it right away before starting this typing. I don't know what's to happen after the meet today. If I'm still alive and able to add to what I've written here, I promise I will. You want to contact me? Give it a try, but be patient. Like I say, I have no idea what's in store for me, and it may take a day or two for me to get back to you. But if I'm able, I will. I promise. Will that make all this more real? Honestly, I hope so. That's for you to decide. Here's the email. AndersonAlienEncounter@gmail.com. That's it. The end. Almost. Once more. What I've been telling you. It's no more crazy than much of the stuff I've heard and read about. I ran into a group in California years ago, claiming most movie stars are aliens. California, right? I met folks in Maine who claimed aliens were developing the seabed off the coast. There was the group in Kansas who were sure aliens were here to obtain crop samples. Those kinds of stories are everywhere, and the folks that tell them, that believe them, they seem reasonably normal. I think I'm reasonably normal too. So, if you've made it this far, I hope I've at least been entertaining. But I promise, this story is true. Drop me an email sometime. If I'm here, if I'm alive, I'll get you an update. I promise. Wish me luck. I might need it.